No longer. Alimony, palimony. It's all financial. Love's an illusion.
It's the only illusion that counts, my friend.
Says who?
Anyone who's ever been in love.
Love sucks.
In 1985, a magazine article labelled him part of the Brat Pack, and Andrew McCarthy says it nearly destroyed his career. He was the guy every girl wanted to end up with in the 80s, the sensitive one, the safe choice, the romantic lead in Pretty in Pink. But behind the scenes, he was drinking far too much, struggling to connect, and feeling like a fraud. Then, in the early 2000s, he did something almost no one saw coming, something that had nothing to do with Hollywood. And years later, he came back. But not in the way anyone expected. So, what really happened to Andrew McCarthy? Let's fade to black. Andrew Thomas McCarthy was born on November 29, 1962 in Westfield, New Jersey, a quiet suburb where ambition wasn't exactly encouraged. His father worked in investments, his mother was an artist. But McCarthy has said he always felt like something was missing. He describes himself as shy, uncertain, someone who didn't quite fit in. Acting became his way out, or maybe his way in. He attended NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, studying under some of the same teachers who'd trained De Niro and Pacino. But McCarthy wasn't interested in method acting or gritty realism. He wanted to feel something, to be someone else for a while. His first real break came in 1983 with Class, a coming-of-age drama where he starred opposite Jacqueline Bisset and a young Rob Lowe. It wasn't a huge hit, but it got him noticed, specifically for his looks. Blue eyes and a sort of wistful, wounded expression that made casting directors think, romantic lead. And that's exactly what he became. In 1985, he was cast in Heaven Help Us, a small drama about Catholic school students in the 1960s. Again, not a blockbuster, but it put him in rooms with the right people. Directors liked him, producers liked him. He was easy to work with, reliable, and he photographed well. But McCarthy has said that even then he felt like he was pretending, like everyone else knew what they were doing and he was just, well, improvising. That feeling of being a fraud would follow him around for years. In 1985, everything exploded. Andrew McCarthy was cast in St. Elmo's Fire, Joel Schumacher's ensemble drama about a group of recent college grads trying to figure out adulthood. The cast included Emilio Estevez, Rob Lowe, Demi Moore, Judd Nelson, Ali Sheedy, and Mare Winningham. Basically everyone under 25 who was working in Hollywood at the time. The film was a moderate success, but what came next changed everything. In June 1985, New York Magazine published an article by David Blum titled Hollywood's Brat Pack. It was supposed to be a profile of Emilio Estevez, but Blum turned it into a takedown, painting the young cast as shallow, privileged, and interchangeable. He lumped them all together under one dismissive label, the Brat Pack. McCarthy has said that article felt like a death sentence. Suddenly he wasn't Andrew McCarthy actor, he was Andrew McCarthy Brat Pack member. And in Hollywood, labels like that stick. They become the story. They define you before you even walk in the room. But despite that, the roles kept coming. In 1986, he starred opposite Molly Ringwald in Pretty in Pink, playing Blaine McDonough, the rich, preppy guy who falls for the artsy girl from the wrong side of the tracks. Andrew McCarthy brought something quietly complicated to it, a kind of shame, like Blaine knew he was supposed to be better than he was. The film was a massive hit, and once again, McCarthy became the guy, the one you were supposed to root for, the one who shows up at the end. But here's what made McCarthy different from a lot of his peers. He appealed to everyone. Most actors back then fell into one of two camps. They were either for the girls or for the guys. Rob Lowe had that untouchable golden boy thing that made him a teen idol, but a lot of guys found him hard to relate to. McCarthy, though, he had this easygoing, almost self-deprecating quality that made him non-threatening. He wasn't the coolest guy, but he wasn't trying to be, and that made him very accessible to women who saw him as sweet and romantic, and to men who saw him as just a guy, someone who could have been their friend. He didn't come off as full of himself, he seemed uncertain, even a little awkward, and in a decade full of big personalities and bigger egos, that made him stand out. Then came Less Than Zero in 1987, and this one was different. Based on Bret Easton Ellis's novel, it was a dark, nihilistic look at wealthy Los Angeles teenagers spiraling into drugs and self-destruction. McCarthy played Clay, a college student who returns home to find his best friend, played by Robert Downey Jr., addicted to cocaine and selling himself to pay off debts. It was the most vulnerable, stripped-down performance McCarthy had given, and he said it was also the most honest. because by that point he was drinking heavily himself, not quite at Downey's level, but enough to recognise the emptiness in the character. Critics dismissed the film as too glossy and too Hollywood, but McCarthy knew better. That emptiness, that numbness, he wasn't acting. Later that same year, he starred in Mannequin, a romantic comedy about a guy who falls in love with a department store mannequin that comes to life. It was ridiculous and campy, but brilliant fun, a complete tonal 180 from Less Than Zero, but it made over $42 million and became a classic. And that's the thing about Andrew McCarthy in the 80s. He was everywhere, but he wasn't really anywhere. He was the face on the poster, but he didn't know who he was underneath it. By the time the 90s rolled around, the Brat Pack label had done its damage. McCarthy had been blunt about this. Hollywood didn't know what to do with him once he stopped looking like a teenager. He wasn't a character actor. He wasn't a leading man in the traditional sense. He was the guy you cast as the romantic interest in a teen movie, and once that window closed, so did the doors. In 1988, he reunited with Molly Ringwald for Fresh Horses, a darker, grittier drama about a college student who falls for a troubled girl from rural Kentucky. On paper, it should have worked. Same pairing that made Pretty in Pink a hit. But this time, audiences just didn't show up. Critics didn't care. The chemistry that worked before it just didn't. It was a clear sign that the era was over. He tried grittier material in Kansas, playing a drifter caught up in a bank robbery, but it came and went without much notice. He kept working, but the roles got smaller. Weekend at Bernie's in 1989 became a surprise hit and spawned a sequel, but McCarthy has said he took it because he needed the money, not because he believed in it, and while the film has a following now, at the time it felt like a step backward. In 1991 he starred in Year of the Gun, a thriller set in 1970s Italy. It barely made a dent. He had a small role in The Joy Luck Club in 1993, a critically acclaimed ensemble drama, but by then he was already a supporting player, not the lead. Getting In 1994 came and went. Dream Man in 1995 went straight to video. He wasn't bombing out spectacularly, he just wasn't relevant anymore, and the drinking got worse. McCarthy has spoken about this period as one of deep disorientation. He'd spent his 20s being told he was special, being recognised everywhere, being somebody, and then suddenly he wasn't. Auditions dried up, calls stopped coming, and when they did, the roles felt beneath him, or maybe he just couldn't connect to them anymore. He describes feeling invisible, not because people didn't know who he was, but because he didn't know who he was. So he started travelling. At first it was just to get away, to escape the feeling of being stuck, but somewhere along the way it became something else. He started writing about the places he visited, not as a celebrity, but as someone trying to figure out what came next. And slowly, quietly, that became his way forward. In the early 2000s, Andrew McCarthy did something almost no one in Hollywood does. He walked away from acting and built an entirely new career. He started writing travel essays. At first they were just personal reflections, attempts to make sense of where he'd been and where he was going, but editors started noticing. His writing wasn't glossy or aspirational, it was introspective, honest, and sometimes uncomfortable. He wrote about getting lost, about being alone, about the gap between who you are and who you thought you'd be. In 2010, he was named editor-at-large for National Geographic Traveller, a position he still holds. He's since published multiple books, including The Longest Way Home in 2012, a memoir about travelling the world in search of something he couldn't name, and Just Fly Away in 2017, a young adult novel. But here's the thing McCarthy has said repeatedly. Travel writing wasn't a pivot, it wasn't a return, it gave him a sense of purpose that acting never did, because in acting he was always performing, always trying to be what someone else wanted, but in writing he could just be. Around the same time he also started directing. Not features, not passion projects, just TV. Lots of TV. Gossip Girl, Orange is the New Black, The Blacklist, Grace and Frankie, Dead to Me, dozens of episodes across dozens of shows. And he said he loves it. Because directing isn't about being seen, it's about shaping a story. It's about collaboration, it's about craftsmanship. McCarthy didn't need to be famous anymore, he just said he needed to feel useful. Andrew McCarthy's personal life has been shaped by two things: love and avoidance. He was first married to Carol Schneider in 1999. They had 2 children together, Sam and Willow, but the marriage didn't last, ending around 2005. McCarthy has said he wasn't emotionally available, that he didn't know how to let people in. that he was running from intimacy the same way he'd been running from everything else. In 2011, he married Dolores Rice, an Irish author and activist. They have one daughter together, and McCarthy has said this marriage feels different. Not because he's a different person, but because he finally stopped pretending to be. In his 2021 memoir, Brat, an 80s story, McCarthy opened up about his struggle with alcohol. He wasn't a dramatic tabloid drunk. He didn't crash cars or get arrested. He just drank. Every day. For years. Because it numbed the feeling that he wasn't enough. He said that being famous in your 20s messes with your sense of self in ways that are hard to explain. You're told you're special, but you don't feel special. You're told you have everything, but you feel empty. And you start believing that you're the problem, that everyone else has figured it out, and you're just faking it. Alcohol made that feeling go away for a while. He eventually got sober, though he's been careful not to frame it as a dramatic redemption story. It wasn't rehab or rock bottom. It was just a slow realization that he didn't want to live that way anymore. He's also been open about therapy, about learning to sit with discomfort, about the fact that getting older has been a relief because he finally stopped caring what people thought. And maybe that's the real story. Not that he escaped fame, but that he stopped letting it define him. For decades, Andrew McCarthy avoided talking about the Brat Pack. He didn't do nostalgia interviews. He didn't want to be defined by something that happened to him when he was 23. But in 2021, he published Brat, an 80s story, a memoir that forced him to confront it all. The book is raw, self-critical, and deeply reflective, and it clearly wasn't enough, because in 2024, McCarthy went even further. He directed Brats, a Hulu documentary that brought the surviving members of the Brat Pack together to talk about what that era did to them. Demi Moore, Emilio Estevez, Ali Sheedy, Rob Lowe, they all showed up, and for the first time, they were honest. Not nostalgic, not defensive, just honest. Andrew McCarthy doesn't trash Hollywood, but he also doesn't romanticize it. In interviews, he said that the industry in the 80s was intoxicating and isolating in equal measure. You were constantly told you were special, but only if you stayed valuable, only if people still wanted you. He's talked about how transactional it all felt, how relationships were built around utility, how quickly people moved on when you stopped being useful. But he's also said he's grateful, because that experience of being famous, then not famous, then something else entirely, taught him that identity can't come from external validation, it has to come from somewhere deeper. He's still in the industry, but on his terms. He directs TV because he enjoys the work, not because he needs the recognition. He writes because it centers him. He travels because it reminds him the world is bigger than Hollywood. And he's at peace with the fact that most people still think of him as the guy from Pretty in Pink. Because that's not who he is anymore, it's just something he did. He said that getting older has been a gift, because it's given him permission to stop performing, to stop trying to be what other people want, to just exist. That's the happy ending, not fame, not redemption, clarity. So, what happened to Andrew McCarthy? The truth is, he didn't disappear, he just stopped being who everyone expected him to be. He wasn't interested in pretending the 80s were the best years of his life, because they weren't. Instead, he became a travel writer, a director, a novelist, a husband, a father, someone who finally figured out how to be present. He spent his 20s being told he was special, he spent his 30s wondering why he didn't feel that way, and he spent his 40s and 50s building a life that doesn't depend on anyone else's approval. The Brat Pack label nearly broke him, but in the end it didn't define him. Thanks for watching. If you grew up watching Andrew McCarthy or discovered him later through his writing or directing, drop a comment and let me know your favourite role or what surprised you most about his story. And if you'd like to support the channel and keep us making these, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. And as ever, I really do look forward to seeing you all in the next one.